Hey space travelers, are you ready to go on discovery with me and learn who owns space? Or are you afraid to discover the whole truth? At some point or another, you've asked this very question: who owns space? What laws apply to the final frontier, and who decides what those laws will be if they don't exist? This is the topic of this video. Whether it is international treaties that currently grew in space, the inevitable future developments that will occur shortly, or the conspirational claims that the richest people in the world own everything in space, we will talk about each of those things in some way. So consider subscribing if you end up liking this video. Now, get ready because this is going to be a fun ride in the intricacies of legislating space. In 1967, a bunch of people from more than 100 countries got together and talked a lot about space. After some time, one of the most important treaties has been agreed on by all the representatives, and something called the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 was made. This is the closest thing we have to the Space Constitution. It isn't very long, and you can read it in 10 minutes. But it established 5 main principles for anybody that has any relations with space. Before we delve into what those 5 principles are, we need to keep in mind the following idea. Even if it's not written in this treaty, something like killing people is still not allowed. How that happens is simple. If the United States sends a rocket to colonize Mars, the laws of United States will apply to that rocket ship as well, even if the rocket is privately owned. So no legal marijuana or other drugs on Starship. If the rocket is jointly made by a group of countries and is operated and inhabited by people from more than one country, then what's called an international law applies, which sadly also prohibits killing people. So everything about basic human rights is the same we've got here on Earth. Just like we mentioned above, the Treaty of 1967 has 5 guiding principles. Although further declarations have been made, these 5 are the basis on which those other ones are built. Those are more the principles related to satellites and things like that. We could waste a lot of time trying to go through every principle and law. There are 17 articles in 1967 treaty alone, so reading just those will take the whole video. So instead, let's read the 2 most important principles of space law so far. The first is the Declaration of Legal Principles governing the activities of states in the exploration and uses of outer space. It says the following: all space exploration will be done with good intentions and is equally open to all states that comply with international law. No one nation may claim ownership of outer space or any celestial body. Activities carried out in space must obey the international law, and the nation undergoing these said activities must accept responsibility for the governmental or non-governmental agency involved. Objects launched into space are subject to their nation or belonging, including people. Objects, parts, and components discovered outside the jurisdiction of nation will be returned upon identification. If a nation launches an object into space, they are responsible for any damages that occur internationally. Thankfully, it's easy and interesting enough to read without needing any specific explanation. So, the space is free for all of us to explore given the capabilities. It belongs to all of us. Oh, and no nukes. Is that clear enough? Good. Now let's get to the second equally important principle. States are free to determine all aspects of their participation in international cooperation in the exploration and use of outer space on an equitable and mutually acceptable basis. All states, particularly those with relevant space capabilities and with programs for the exploration and use of outer space, should contribute to promoting and fostering international cooperation on an equitable and mutually acceptable basis. In this context, Particular attention should be given to the benefit for and interest of developing countries. And countries with incipient space programs seeming for such intentional cooperation conduct with countries with more advanced space capabilities. International cooperation should be conducted in the modes that are considered most effective and appropriate by the countries concerned, including inter alia, governmental and non-governmental, commercial and non-commercial, global, multilateral, regional or bilateral, and international cooperation among countries in all levels of development. To boil it down to its most important part, the second principle means that we should all play fairly when it comes to the space exploration. But I can bet you're wondering, what is space exactly? This is a very important question and will probably be up for debate in the coming decades. Believe it or not, even the Earth is in space. So, definition for space needs to be made. Right now, the closest thing we have to that is anything about 100 kilometers. So, wherever you are standing right now, if you flew in upward trajectory with an average speed of 60 kilometers an hour, you'd be in space in about 1 hour and 40 minutes. For reference, the ISS, or the International Space Station, is as high as 420 kilometers from the sea level. It is very fascinating when you think about it. 420 kilometers from the sea level, and you are already weightless and can experience things that very few people have ever experienced. Just so I can blow your mind, ISS is closer to you than London is to Paris. Think about that. And while you are thinking about that, you might get a new question. What about the space casinos? If you paid more than a moderate amount of attention, you probably realized that in neither of earlier mentioned principles were any mentions of potential commercial use of space. There is one reason for that. Nobody thought about it. Remember that a treaty was made in 1967, 2 years before Neil Armstrong moonwalked on the moon. There is a vague mention of that issue. Any and all celestial bodies can be used by governmental or private organization for resource extraction. So, if Elon or Jeff decide to go and start mining operations on the moon, they will be able to do it. So far, there is no legislation prohibiting you from doing any commercial activities anywhere in space. So, technically speaking, the space, at least for the time being, is the most liberate place in the universe. You can go wherever you want and profit from whatever you want. But unfortunately, space is not liberating in one crucial way. Do you remember the phrase, "Space belongs to everyone"? Does that sound familiar to you? Can you imagine something that belongs to everyone? Well, the Earth certainly belongs to everyone. But in practice, you need all sorts of papers to go from one country to another. Certainly, you don't own someone else's property. So technically, Earth doesn't belong to everyone. Nothing belongs to everybody. So, saying that space belongs to everybody is going to create more problems than solutions. The idea of something being owned by everyone likely reminds you of communism. And you won't be wrong of thinking that. In every communism country, the very idea of private property is outlawed. This creates a big problem for any communist country and the future development of space. Consider the following situation. Let's say there's a meteor in space, not far from the moon. Let's say a company from the United States decides to go to that meteor and start mining rare materials to send it back to the Earth. Since that meteor can be claimed by the company or the nation it is based in, any other company from any other country can go to that same meteor and do the same thing the first company is doing. On one hand, it would seem fair for both companies to have the right to mine on that same meteor. But on the other hand, the first company found that meteor, examined that meteor, found the rare materials, did the planning, and everything else. And the other company just used that information and went to make the profit. By not having the right to claim that meteor, the first company is unfairly discouraged for doing any research, because the other company just copied it for free. This is an issue we'll need to solve in the coming years. Not having the right to private property hurdles the development of everything on Earth. Imagine, what will it do in space? Even if we disagree the property problem, there is one more problem with the future of space laws. The treaty says that space is owned by everybody. The problem is that not everybody can go to space. Most countries on Earth haven't even been in a low Earth orbit, so only wealthy countries can afford to go to space. There is nothing wrong with the treaty in this example, but it is funny and sad that the space belongs to everybody, but only selected few can actually go there. So, technically speaking, the wealthy own a space, but not in a way that a normal conspiracy-minded person would think. It is hard to say how space laws will change in the future, but one thing is for certain. They will change, or at least be developed enough that you won't recognize them anymore. Many things need to be defined. There will be problems with the ownership of space that we literally can't think about right now, because we haven't developed the ideas that will cause those problems yet. What do you think will be the most important law that will be made concerning space colonization? If you could claim any celestial body just by standing on it, which country would claim the most land? Give us your thoughts in the comment section below. And while you are there, consider hitting that subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and we'll meet in the next episode.